In today's video, we're going to be talking about arguably the most versatile lens for your photography, the Tamron 24-70 G2 lens. Before we start this video, I just want to say that I've got a new audio setup. So I wasn't too happy with my shotgun mic. I invested in this mic specifically for my podcast. Make sure you check that out, All Outdoors Photography Podcast. But anyway, I mostly got this mic for that. But I decided it sounds so good that I might start using it for my videos. So in the comments below, leave your thoughts on me using this microphone, and if you think I can make good content with it. I think it sounds really good. It's a little annoying that it has to be right in my face, but I think that good audio quality will be worth it. Okay, let's get back into the review. So, this lens, the Tamron 24-70 G2. It is a great lens. This is pretty much my everything lens. In fact, I'd say I take about 60 to 70% of shots with this lens. So I'm going to kind of split this review up a bit. So the first part, I'm going to kind of talk about build quality and kind of what you get in the box and whatnot. Not really an unboxing, but just a general overview. And then I'm going to talk about some of the features of this lens. So its aperture, image stabilization, whatnot, autofocus performance, that kind of stuff. Then at the end, I'm going to talk about optics, and then I might even show you a couple of my images that I've taken with this lens. All right, so let's just start off with build quality. This thing is pretty much built like a tank. I have had one issue with this lens, but I'll get to that in a second. First of all, when you buy this lens, it comes in really nice packaging. Even though Tamron is a third-party company, they still know how to produce a good product. It basically comes in this really, really nice box. So in that box, you've got a nice carrying case. Unfortunately, I don't have any footage of this because it's been so long ago. But you get a nice carrying case, and you also get a 6-year warranty, which actually came in handy for me later on down the road. It's got a really nice zoom ring, which I like. Some of you Canon shooters might find it annoying that it goes the Nikon direction. That's not really been a problem for me. I'm used to this lens, so I don't really care too much about that. But it's a nice zoom ring, and in fact, I think it might be a little bit too large because one of my problems with the build quality of this lens is the smaller focus ring. It's like extremely small on here, and I'm not sure why. They could have made a much bigger focus ring. Perhaps they could have gotten rid of the focus indicator or something in order to accommodate for that. Let's see. So it also has a very convenient lock button on the exterior of the body. And this locks it in at 24 millimeters when you're putting in your bag and whatnot, so your barrel doesn't extend. It's got a nice autofocus and image stabilization switch on the side. I'll get into that more later. And it does claim to be weather sealed, which I do believe them. It's got a nice ring around the part where it mounts to the camera, and it seems to be pretty durable. However, it is an extendable barrel. And when you have an extendable barrel, you can introduce some water into that barrel. Now, I never thought I'd have a problem with this, but I actually did. So, to say it briefly, I ended up pretty much a couple days after I got this lens, I took it out to a very snowy location. It wasn't really snowy at the time. I went out to a snowy sand dune, and then it started there's an absolute downpour of snow, and snow definitely got into the lens, I'll say that. And when I closed the zoom ring, I believe some snow melted in my lens and caused some softness problems. So I dealt with these problems for about a month, and then I finally sent it to Tamron, and I got it back 4 months later. So that pissed me off a little bit, but that wasn't Tamron's fault. It was because of the global pandemic. I actually ended up sending this lens right before it started, and the facility shut down as soon as it got there. So, yeah, that was not good, but still a great lens. Just be careful. That's a problem with all extendable barrels. If they didn't make an extendable barrel, it would be really long because they would have to build it all into one body. So I think the extendable barrel is okay as long as you know how to use it properly in different conditions. Pretty much for build quality, that's pretty much it. They give you good caps and a good lens cap and everything. It's good. It's got an SP logo on the side, you might see. That means super performance, so it's kind of like Canon's L series or Sony G Master. It's just kind of their more premium quality, better performance lens, improved autofocus and whatnot. And this is the G2 version of the lens as well, just so you know. And the G2 version, in my opinion, the exterior looks way better than the G1 version. G1 version was just kind of too glamorous, I guess. I don't know. It looked a little bit weird. And I think many people agree with me on that. So now let's get into the features of this lens. So first of all, what is the focal range? So this lens goes from 24 millimeters to 70 millimeters. What does that mean for your photography? Well, this is a very versatile focal range. You can get wide shots at 24 and semi-telephoto shots all the way in at 70. And I think this is just great. Most people, I mostly do landscape photography, and most people who do landscape start with a 16 to 35. But I thoroughly believe that a 24 to 70 is the best to start with, at least for me, because I usually find myself, I shoot a lot at 24, but sometimes I find myself more around the 50 millimeter range or the 35 millimeter range, or maybe even 70. So I think it's good to have a lens like this where you have more control over your shot than the 16 to 35. If there's something that's kind of far away, you can just zoom in on this lens. This also makes it good for other applications like portraits, travel, street, all kinds of things because you have this versatile zoom range. Another good feature of this lens is the f2.8 aperture. Now, I had a couple options. I could not afford the Canon L series 24 to 70 f2.8. So I could either go with Canon 24 to 70 f4L IS with macro capabilities. This lens, the 24 to 70 f2.8 image stabilized, or VC, vibration compensation. So I decided to go with this lens because it's only $1,200. For all the features you're getting in this lens, that's really, really darn good. And I would highly suggest something like this if you're on a budget because you will not be making any compromises with this lens. So, as for the image stabilization or vibration compensation, it's pretty good. I wouldn't say it's world class. I have better lenses with better image stabilization. But I can go down to about 1/15th of a second with this lens. And the reason you may be saying you shoot mostly landscapes, why do you need f2.8 in image stabilization? Well, I actually do a lot of portrait work, specifically theatrical photography. So when I'm in those dark stage areas, although it may seem bright to you, those lights are not great for photography. I need to have that image stabilization to keep my shutter speed low, and I also need f2.8 to really let in as most light as possible. So this lens is great for that, and I've gotten some great shots using this lens for theatrical photography. I really don't use image stabilization outside of that, as I really use a tripod everywhere I go, pretty much, unless I'm traveling and I can't carry a tripod around. So the image stabilization probably doesn't get used as much as I want to, but it's still a good feature to have on this lens. So, autofocus on this lens is great. There's one thing. I'm using this lens on the Canon EOS RP, a full frame mirrorless camera. So on the Canon RF mount. So I had to adapt with the EF RF adapter to this lens. And it works great, but you need to do a firmware update. Tamron released a firmware pretty much right away that allows you to use this camera with the lens, but you really do have to do the update. You will still get decent autofocus. Like, it'll show that you focused without the firmware update, but then it will be out of focus slightly. So you do need to get that firmware update, and you could probably find a camera store nearby that has a certified Tamron repair specialist that can do that for you. Or you can buy the Tamron tap-in console, which is about the $60 thing. It's actually really cool. I haven't invested in it yet, but if I get a second Tamron lens, I definitely will. This tap-in console allows you to micro-adjust your autofocus and also install firmware updates. It's pretty cool. No other companies seem to have it, which is pretty darn awesome. But autofocus is great. Tracking, everything, it works great. It's very seamless. It's not quiet, which is fine. I do use this as my primary video lens, but it's very far away from me, so that's never a problem for me. So it is loud autofocus, but that's okay. But it is quick. That's good. One thing that's a little bit annoying with this lens, and I don't know if it's a problem with the adapter or not, but when I stop down multiple stops in aperture, it kind of clicks down. It's not like a seamless transition. It like stops down, if that makes sense. So that's a little bit annoying, but it never has affected the way I get a shot. So that's okay. Just keep that in mind if you're using it on an adapter. But it works great. You could use this with the R5, R6, RP, or or the RA. Any of those cameras, this would work great with. And in fact, I recommend this over the Canon RF 24-70 2.8 IS. That's a new lens, but it's about $3,000, and this lens has the exact same features. Now, I'm sure the RF1 has slightly better autofocus, but this is suitable for pretty much everything. You could use this for street, portraits, landscapes, anything that really requires a versatile lens like this. It's just great. So now let's go on to image quality. So when you combine the great autofocus, excellent aperture, you can really get some great shots. So sharpness, like I said, is amazing. I mean, you get extremely sharp images. It is a little unsharp in the corners sometimes, not always. You do have to keep that in mind. And I would say through testing, this lens is probably its sharpest at f8. That is a little bit of a negative to me because I like to shoot my landscapes at f11 or higher to achieve a better depth of field because I don't always like to focus stack. And speaking of focus stacking on this lens, unfortunately there is a lot of focus breathing. So when I focus on one area of the scene and then another, they're different sizes because the way the lens zooms in to focus. And that it does annoy me quite a bit and adds some extra steps to my post-processing workflow. I can't just line up the layers. I have to auto-align and make sure there's no ghosting when I blend the two layers eventually. That is definitely probably my least favorite thing about this lens, but it's a lot of lenses have it, so I'm not really mad. You have to buy really expensive, high quality Zeiss lenses or something to completely eliminate focus breathing. So I wouldn't be too worried about that if you're looking at buying this lens, but it is definitely an issue to think about. Like I said, it's extremely sharp, except the edges sometimes. It stops down to f22. I wish it maybe went a little bit further to f32 or something. For example, if I needed to capture a sunstar, but that's still good. I never use the little focus indicator on here, so I never seem to miss focus. I always use either autofocus or manual focus, and this lens can do it well. Seems to be pretty accurate, especially after that firmware update. Make sure you get that if you're shooting on a camera like I am. One other thing is this lens, I don't notice any chromatic aberration, which is great. Here is a tip though. When you put this lens on your camera will get these weird circles because it cannot. Your camera has built-in corrections for all Canon lenses for chromatic aberration, but this does not, so you'll get weird circles. So if you in particular have problems with chromatic aberration, just do it in your editing software. Most editing softwares nowadays have corrections for that. But this lens, I never see a problem with that. One thing I do see a problem with is when you're shooting directly into the sun, there's quite a bit of flaring, quite a bit of color fringing. Not chromatic aberration, but just kind of a color cast over the scene. That's fine. I guess it's built more for portrait work and stuff, where that's not really a problem. Maybe not landscape so much, but it's not a deal breaker for me, definitely. I still get great shots when shooting into the sun. I just have to compensate. You have to know your lens in order to get good shots. Every lens has its quirks, but the sharpness and the clarity produced by this is amazing. And also, some lenses have different levels of clarity at different focal ranges. As you go from 24-70, that does not change. It stays at that constant f2.8 aperture, and you get great sharpness at each focal range. But just make sure you adjust your aperture and shutter speed accordingly based on your focal length, because that also has an effect on your scene. Because if you're at, say, f8 at 70, that will be not everything will be in focus compared to 24 millimeters because of the different compression of the lenses. So keep that in mind. So now I'm going to head over to my computer here, and I'm going to show you my favorite images with this lens. So this here is probably one of my favorites. This is actually the first waterfall image I took on this lens. And back then, I really didn't know much about focus on landscape photography. So I think I missed focus a bit, but it's still great. Clarity's great, colors are great, just great. And you can capture great waterfall shots like this with this lens. So if you're looking to do landscapes, look no farther than this lens. And I think that this proves that right there. This is actually pretty much the first picture I took on this lens. This is at a lovely park. You've got a nice reflection. This is when I was having a little bit of sharpness issues. I believe this was actually after I went out in the snow. but it still produces great shots. I really love the color, how colors reproduce with this lens. Here's another one of my favorites. This really demonstrates the power of being able to show the whole scene at 24 millimeters. I really enjoyed this shot right here. And this lens, it was actually, there's some water spraying up at me, and this lens with its weather sealing protected from that completely. So I'm really grateful for the ability of that lens in this scenario. Okay, here's an example of another one of my favorite shots. This is shot at about 35 millimeters. So just so you know, I don't always shoot at 24. This is actually an exposure blend, and it's probably my favorite shot of the year. I really love how this lens was able to get everything in focus pretty much and just create a really great scene. So you can produce shots like this as well. Here's another one, just in my opinion, a beautiful scene. Beautiful trees and lovely sand, and I really like that picture. Here's another one here. Just a great lens. I don't know what else there is to say. So those were my favorite images from this lens. And as you can see, you can produce great results with this. No matter if you're on a DSLR or mirrorless Canon camera, or even Nikon, you should purchase this lens. If you're looking for a budget zoom lens that will give you everything you need, look no further. Thank you guys for watching today's review. I hope you enjoyed it. I really put a lot of time and thought into this review. And there's some more reviews coming in the future. I'm probably going to be doing a review of my Canon RP soon. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.